Wow. I think I have a problem. So what's up guys, I'm Dimitri with Harvard Canucks, and in the past few months I've been really trying to explore all types of different mechanical keyboards so I could give you a little bit of a guide on what you should be potentially looking out for if you're thinking of buying a mechanical keyboard. The Z9 Neo by Zalman brings all the right features on a budget, with a large windowed side panel, 5 included fans, and an excellent interior layout with super simple cable management. Get it now? Link in the description below. But before we begin, I want to say that a mechanical keyboard does not make you a better gamer. And in our previous what to upgrade first for your gaming setup, I put the keyboard in the last possible category because it feels nice to type on the mechanical switches, but it's not necessarily essential like you would have with the aim with the mouse or having proper positional audio if let's say you're into competitive gaming. And when choosing what mechanical switch is best for you, you have to consider 3 things. The first is actuation force, or how much your finger has to press on the key for it to go down. So that means for a light key, like at 45 grams or less, you can almost lightly tap on the key for them to start registering, and it takes some time to get used to, but it's a really awesome technique for fast typing once you get to learn all your keys and how the switch operates. For heavier switches like 50 grams plus, because you need to have a little bit extra more force for the key to actuate, I tend to bottom out more on the heavier switches like MX Blues and MX Blacks as well. Now, when we talk about the actuation force, the conversation sometimes derails into discussion about lighter switches giving you less finger fatigue, heavier ones giving you, having your hand more tired after prolonged periods of time, and there is some merit to that. You know, if you're playing FPS games for 10 hours straight and you're constantly in the WASD zone, having a lighter switch helps because your hand won't be as tired after, 10 hours. But for typing, heavy or light switch really doesn't make a difference. It's all about how you interact with it, whether you like to bottom out or whether you prefer to train your hands so that you're typing quite fast, but without fully touching the bottom of the board. The second thing to think about is tactile point. Do you want a key that is linear, so the key simply travels down without giving you any physical feedback on when that key is registered, or do you want something that has an actual tactile point built in so that you are given a physical feedback on when that key is registered? Now, one never-ending debate between keyboard enthusiasts, and that is whether or not tactile switches like the MX Blues are better for gaming versus something like a linear switch. For me, linear switches is best across the board. However, I've been using the MX Blue for last week, just trying to get into the mindset of people that love the switch and cannot go back to anything else. And for me, for typing, it's a fantastic experience, just really satisfying in terms of the actuation force, the actuation point, the travel distance, everything about the switch is perfect. However, playing games like CSGO, I cannot use this keyboard or this switch because when I need to reload the weapon and have to switch back to my primary weapon to skip the reload animation, you guys know that if you're a CSGO player, I cannot do that with this keyboard because I have to lift the finger off the key completely for the key to reset. Something that slows me down. I cannot do such a fast finger movement with a blue like I can do with a red or another linear switch. And this is where the MX Cherry Brown switch comes into play. I've really come to love this switch because it's still light actuation at 45 grams of force. It still has an only tiny bit of a tactile bump, so you know when the key is registered, but it doesn't give you that audible tactile response like the greens or like the blues, which greens are based on. And the third thing to think about is actuation distance. So when exactly is the key being registered on its way down? So we're going from 2 millimeters, which is sort of the standard actuation point, and to something slightly higher, to like 1.2 millimeter actuation point on something like the MX Speed, giving you a very light and a fast key, but not necessarily for everyone. Now I want to make it clear that shorter actuation distance doesn't actually make you a better gamer. In fact, you may potentially have more keyboard mistakes where the finger weight as you rest your hand on the keyboard might accidentally activate the switch because it's light and the actuation distance is so short. I would say sound is an important factor in every keyboard, and interestingly, if you take the same switch and put it on different keyboards, they might sound slightly different, and all keyboards have their own unique sound signature. The blues, however, are the loudest in my collection. They're quite loud if you're really going at it. But all linear switches are pretty much dead quiet because you cannot hear the spring depression. It's only if you bottom out or if you release the key when it's been depressed, they can actually hear what's happening in the keyboard. The TOPRE switches have very unique sound signature. The blues are the loudest. And the SteelSeries SQ1 switch is definitely the quietest. Now, what's really interesting about mechanical switches is that keyboards have a way of placing certain switches in their almost intended usage scenario. So let's say MECH-Cherry Reds are to be considered one of the most popular gaming switches. You can find a lot of mechanical boards with an MECH-Cherry Red switch. MX Blues are also considered to be quite excellent for gaming, but it's all about personal preference. I would definitely recommend you try before you buy. And now let's do a general overview of all these switches, starting with the basic rubber dome keyboard. Now they're actually getting quite good with some useful features like spill resistance on this Logitech board and a very familiar feel to a mechanical switch, but obviously not as smooth. However, they are quieter when you bottom out, and that might be a positive for you. Moving on to MECH-Cherry Reds, I would call it a good all-around uses. It's very light and it's linear switch with a very nice crispy rebounds. It's good for typing, it's good for gaming. I would definitely recommend it to any first mechanical keyboard user. TESORO's AGILE RED switches are also linear and having shorter actuation point, but the rebounds compared to Cherry Reds feel a bit muddy and not as smooth when the key is coming up back up, which is the major difference between KAILH and Cherry variant. The MECH-Cherry Blues are the next community favorite because of their clicky nature and being a heavier switch, so you don't have to worry about accidental presses by resting your fingers on the keys. It is an awesome switch, but I cannot perform multiple keystrokes on the same key because of that high reset point, although the reset bump is very pronounced, so there's no mistaking when the key is ready to be pressed again. Then there's the TESORO's AGILE Blues that offer shorter actuation distance compared to Cherry Blues, but the reset bump when the key is coming up is not as pronounced as on the Cherry Blues. That might give you a false impression that the key has come back up when in fact it might not have passed that reset point yet, which is also the consequence of having shorter actuation distance. MECH-Cherry Browns are light, just like Reds, but with a slight tactile bump built in, although it is very faint. I would consider Browns to be my favorite tactile switch because it's not as loud as Blues, yet still offer a balance of lightness and bump feedback during actuation. I would definitely recommend Browns as my tactile switch of choice. Cherry MX speed switches are currently my favorite, that are light, linear, with very low actuation point at 1.2 millimeters, making this an ideal switch for FPS gaming. If you're required to keep your fingers on a certain set of keys constantly, that you constantly have to also click, they have very smooth and fast rebounds. I would highly recommend this for competitive, long gaming sessions. The Razer Greens are also quite nice for a tactile switch that feel almost identical to Blues, but with a somewhat softer bottoming out effect. Cherry Blues feel crisper, but I prefer Razer Greens for typing. Then we have the TOPRE capacitive switch that with a new Real Force RGB keyboard allows you to change the actual actuation distance, which is pretty incredible. For 2 years, I exclusively used the NovaTouch TKL keyboard from Cooler Master because of its hybrid capacitive switches, and now with the Real Force RGB, this might become my new favorite keyboard with a linear switch. The rebounds is very sharp, the linear nature is quite different from red switches, but it feels to offer the most premium, this up and down movement of the switch, which I love. The Roma G from Logitech is a combined effort with Gateron Switches, and it's like a hybrid between a rubber dome and a brown switch, having a light tactile bump at 1.5mm actuation with a distinct reset bump as well. I can easily play competitive CSGO with the Roma G switches, but they do feel less smooth compared to browns. And the last switch to discuss is the QS1 from SteelSeries. They feel like a little bit combination between MX Speed because of their low actuation point, then MX Browns in there a little bit too, giving you linear travel for most of the way down that gets slightly harder in the last millimeter or so, resulting in slightly noticeable smoothness difference when the switch is coming back up. And also, it kind of feels like a rubber dome because it is the quietest keyboard in my collection. And you know what's interesting? How all these mechanical switches have their own unique characteristics. I love gaming on MX Speeds and MX Browns. I love typing on TOPRE capacitive and Razor Greens. And I still stand by what I said about having MX Reds, Blues, or Browns as your first mechanical switch experience, because every other switch you will try later will feel different. So try before you buy.
Oh, hey there. NCX.com is Canada's leading e-tailer for anything your mind desires. Just keep within those categories, which are plenty, and get tempted by the weekly deals. Visit NCX.com for all them sweet deals.
So I hope this video has been helpful in trying to establish sort of the general guidelines around mechanical switches. If you're looking to get a mechanical keyboard, what is your favorite switch for gaming, typing, or for everything in between? Let us know in the comments down below. I'm Dmitry with our Canucks. We'll see you in the next video.